It's been a week since the NBA went into unknown territory with a 15-game winning streak
in the city of Cleveland as history continues to unfold.
Fighting against a 10-game winning streak.
Pulling out despite all the pressure, keeps his dribble alive, pulls up mid-range shot, and SGA with a little camper of his own.
Meaning, the Oklahoma City Thunder meeting the Cleveland Cavaliers in a matchup between the league's top two records.
This is an historic regular season game.
And after Cleveland's narrow win, we ask, where do the league's top teams stand on trades? The reason we ask: for one, the Thunder are on the doorstep of now being an elite team and perennial title contender.
But for us, we're at home in front of the best fans in the NBA.
And two, there's a player available now who isn't going back to his team.
So if Jimmy wants to trade, he'll definitely be traded.
And must either be traded by the deadline less than 3 weeks away on February 6th, or the team with this player must sit him till he opts out of his contract at the end of the year and risk getting zilch back. That player that we refer to is none other than Jimmy Butler, and his team is the Miami Heat. Butler is one of the league's best playoff performers, and whichever team obtains his services in a trade will get a guy who has no fear of the Boston Celtics, having personally shown them the door twice in 4 years, both on runs to the finals for the Heat that very few people saw coming. What if Jimmy Buckets were traded to a team with lots of players and picks to offer, and a team that he might consider playing for beyond just one season, one that's in the playoff hunt and has some other key names to balance the scoring with him? Could that team we describe be the Oklahoma City Thunder? Let's take a look at whether that is feasible and what would be needed for a Jimmy Butler trade to OKC. There are undoubtedly a lot of trades we could posit, but this one makes sense just because of the stockpile of first-round picks the Thunder could trade from. Let's also consider why they might or might not make the trade. To start off with though, let's assess the current value of a 35-year-old superstar who can opt out of his deal at the end of this season. There is risk there, to be sure. Jimmy Butler could leave his new team with no compensation other than maybe a sign-and trade, which would be likely for his needs given that the contenders usually have little cap space. When trading for him, you have to live with that, or find a way to give him an extension, or just agree for him to opt in on his 25-26 option year. All possible scenarios here. Now, for stating the obvious, how good a player is Jimmy Butler? Jimmy Butler has been excellent starting his NBA career with the Bulls, rising from a 30th overall pick to an all-star in a few years. He brings intensity on both defense and offense, and a lot of both. But it wasn't until he arrived as a free agent, signed and traded in Miami, that his game really exploded into top 5 mode, and he willed the Heat to their 2 finals visits that were unexpected, especially as an 8 seed in 2023. Before that, in 2020, the Heat ran the table in the playoff bubble season, going through Boston in the conference finals before dropping the finals in 6 games to a very balanced Lakers team. In 2023, despite being an 8th seed, they took out Boston and everyone else in their way and made the finals again, before losing in 5 to the very solid Nuggets team. Those runs made the Heat the team to beat the past 5 years in the East, despite Boston arriving. But Butler's injury last year meant the Heat had to go on at Boston without him, and the Celtics moved on in 5 first-round games. There's no doubting how good a player Jimmy Buckets is, or his impact on a team's will to win. But whenever we consider a player's devalue, we need to take age and contract into account as well. Butler is 35 now, perhaps getting to the end of his prime. But his prime is unique, as he's been a better player in his 30s than in his 20s, due to his game continuously improving through hard work, plus the veteran experience that simply comes from being around a while. If Butler were to land in OKC, he would bring that experience, something that at his point they could be lacking. He has a $52 million player option for next season that he has already informed the Heat he will only use to help make a trade go down. That means the Heat have no chance to bring him back. He's gone. And his value is limited a bit by his ability to leave any team that trades him for now. On the other hand, the team trading for him could request he forgoes his option, meaning he would be under contract through the end of next season, that is 2025 and 2026, making it a 1.5 year minimum commitment. Either way, whoever trades for Butler at age 35 is trading to win immediately, rather than building for a few years down the road. He has great defensive instincts that have only been sharpened under Eric Spoelstra, the coach of the Heat, whose team-building approach worked ideally with Butler's leadership and clutch play.
Over the top to Butler. On the run. Jimmy Butler ties the game with a half second to go.
And yeah, He's the guy that scored 56 on the Celtics in their playoff series 2 years ago, at age 33, and sent them packing before they finally broke through last season with the title. But a small note, Butler was injured for that series versus the Heat. In any case, Butler is an impact player who can play the small forward or even power forward spot, and test an opponent's resolve with thorough play and constant high-volume scoring. Most importantly, he saves his best for the key moments, which is why we're currently having this discussion. Let's face it, with Butler on your team, you can beat Boston, and since they're the defending champion, I'd say that's a big chip. Now, the Thunder have been great all year, and despite the close loss to top record Cleveland, they're 31-6. That's not exactly a bad run. They are number 1 out west, and though they have Denver, Dallas, and the rest chasing them, their depth and defense is on a different level than the rest of their Western Conference contenders. In fact, it's similar to that of Cleveland and Boston, 2 teams with elite two-way players and multiple options to score. But one thing the Cavs do not have is 3 first-round picks in 2025 alone to trade. Thunder GM Sam Presti took on bad contracts for years while rebuilding and now has a treasure trove of first-rounders that he could hang on to or let some go to try and win now. What will he do? Well, let's talk out a hypothetical deal between Miami and OKC that centers on the picks and a few players. If the Heat were to ask for all 3 picks, and Pat Riley would, one would be very familiar to them as it's their own and lottery protected, traded as an afterthought to OKC a few years ago in a cap clearing move. But another wrinkle on that is, if the pick isn't covered to OKC this year because the Heat missed the playoffs, then next year it's unprotected and Sam Presti thinks to himself, nice work. Meaning, the Heat are taking a huge risk in the first post-Jimmy Butler era season. The other picks are from the disappointing 76ers, which is a top 6 protected, and seems like it might end up in the 8-14 range at this point. And also from the Clippers, a swap with the Thunder that might end up around 16-22. That's a haul that no other trade partner could provide right now. While teams could throw unprotected picks for 2030 their way, Pat Riley is 79, and that might not be what he's thinking. And as Pat Riley generally likes winning and might want a quick rebuild, this could be interesting for him. He also drafts very well, given the outside the top 10 draft spots for Bam Adebayo and Tyler Hero, so the idea of 3 picks in one draft might be one he can live with. There's also players, and though the Thunder have an ideal mix of youth and wings, they would have to give a few to slot in at least 75% of Butler's $50 million salary cap slot. So to get to that $38 million number that allows the trade, Lou Dort is the first that comes to mind. He's an excellent defender, a 3-and-D shooting guard with $16.5 million and fits what the Heat could use. Many of the Thunder are off limits, meaning Shai Gilgeous-Alexander and Jalen Williams and Chet Holmgren. 2 just signed contracts with them, Alex Caruso and Isaiah Hartenstein, so not possible for either of them. And 2 guys that signed extensions in the offseason are 6 months removed from that deal, so they're eligible to be traded and by default are the only other guys on the roster that can get to that $38 million number. They are Isaiah Joe at $13 million and Aaron Wiggins around $10 million. So add 16.5 and 13 and 10 million and you're at around 39.5 million total salary in this hypothetical deal. Meaning, you're there if the Thunder don't mind a bit of extra salary. Kenrich Williams at 6.5 million would also be a possibility, but the question is, would the Heat take the package? Presti signing Wiggins and Joe long-term this past offseason allow the team to make a deal like this, or at least have depth that few teams can match. 3 solid 3-and-D wings under contract is good for Miami, and they will want to add people that can play the all-important small forward spot, plus add depth at guard. But it's the picks they're thinking is the ideal aspect to make it happen. If there's one more piece needed, the Heat could ask to add Thunder first-rounder Nikola Topic, a 6'6 shooting guard they took 11th overall after he injured his knee before the draft. He's redshirting this year for the Thunder and should be ready to play next season. But would the Thunder do it? The Thunder have built themselves on great drafting, and Presti having unlimited say-so in their strategic rebuild after the Westbrook Durant years ended. He knows better than to just abandon this when the success is high now. But can he pass on a singular player that could help them get past a Denver team that, when fully healthy, is mostly the same club that won it all 2 years ago? Butler adds a tenacity and mean streak when needed, and this could possibly allow OKC stars Gilgeous-Alexander and Williams to play loose and consider themselves the favorite out west. And beyond that, his advantage over Boston is not just psychological. He matches up with either Tatum or Brown defensively and has zero problem guarding them. The scenario we like is 2 ones, Topic, Dort, Joe, and a few other small salary pieces for Butler. OKC keeps the Clippers pick so they can add some depth, as well as Aaron Wiggins as they've traded depth, and they add Jimmy Buckets to play alongside the stars there, probably shining between the 3 and 4 spots as needed. It gives them a ridiculous series of combinations in their lineup, including a big lineup with Williams playing point guard and Gilgeous-Alexander, Butler, Holmgren, and Hartenstein. Add in Wallace and Caruso at point with their defense, and the Thunder have some seriously high expectations. Is it time to chase a title and more? Or do the Thunder keep building the way Sam Presti has and look to dominate with sheer numbers and shrewd drafting? And before you start screaming, but this is a hypothetical trade, please remember, yes, this is a hypothetical trade. It may not and likely won't happen. But what if it did? Either way, Jimmy Butler is being traded soon, we would think. And the teams like Boston, New York, Denver, Cleveland, and Golden State all have a reason to make the trade and have some younger players and draft picks to part with. But it seems that OKC is best positioned to do this with their picks, young roster, and the top spot in the Western Conference in their reach. Are we saying this can propel them to OKC title number 1? Well, we're not saying it would hold them back, let's put it that way. Either way, it could be a wild trade deadline, as usual in the NBA, so keep your eye open for a big deal via Miami that shifts the playoff landscape.